At this time, I want to call on Senator Tiara Mack for a performance from a group that she has invited up here today. Senator Mack.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to first welcome us into our Black History Month program, which is a time to honor and elevate the many contributions that Black Americans have made in our country. It is also a time to reflect on the systemic ways that this country has oppressed and marginalized Black Americans. We have not yet healed from the deep fractures that this pandemic and the unjust death of young people over the course of 2020. But I am the forever optimist. And in this past year, I watched as almost 10,000 gathered in our state in one of the largest social demonstrations in Rhode Island history, where our state and many others across this nation proclaimed boldly and bravely that Black lives matter. I watched as young people, high school students, led our streets and showed us that the path to a more just and liberated future is in the best of hands. I also have an abundance of hope that we will live to see a future in my lifetime where young people are prepared to take on the task of delivering justice for Black lives, Black women, and Black trans lives. Because when Black lives matter and we combat anti-Blackness in all of its forms, we all benefit. I have the audacious hope that we will all live to see this future. And I know that we must also put that hope into action. One of our speakers tonight, J Shell Shank, is a youth activist. I am hopeful that she will live in that world with me. We must give her and the next generation more than just hope. We must give them something tangible in the fight for Black liberation and justice. We must give them a system where a living wage is earned by every person in our state, and I'm proud that the Senate has already passed a bill to do that. We must ensure that their future is painted in every shade of equity and inclusion. We must give this next generation affordable housing, a clean and environmentally just future, a transformative justice system which focuses on disappearing problems like poverty, food insecurity, and homelessness, and not on disappearing people, family, and loved ones into prisons. We must also give them the blueprints for viewing all of our legislation and our world through a racial justice lens in collaboration with others. We must show them that it is more important to question our systems than to uphold them, that it is more important to lead with the expertise of our own lived experience and our stories than the assumption of stereotypes. And as we wrap up Black History Month, I encourage us all to look for ways to bring these sentiments with us beyond this month, to ask ourselves monthly, weekly, and daily, how will we repair the historic oppressions of anti-Blackness in our society through our policy and through our conversations? I'm excited to introduce Sidi, who is an accomplished drummer and graduate of the Berklee College of Music, who has been drumming all of his life. He is originally from Bamako, Mali, and travels the world drumming. You can see Sidi and his band, Afro-Mending, performing at the United Nations, international music festivals, and in Burnside Park and at the PVD Fest. He brings a fusion of traditional drumming from West African drumming to hip-hop and Caribbean. Please welcome Sidi to the stage. Thank you so much, City. And our next speaker is J Shell Shank, who is a 16-year-old activist. She is the co-founder and executive director of the national youth organization Gen Z We Want to Live. She has been involved in social justice work for the last 3 years. She has spoken at many rallies, met with government officials, testified at the State House, and many, many more things. She started 5 businesses and organizations, and she's a part of organizations like Young Voices, Sunrise Providence, 0 Hour, Planned Parenthood, March for Our Lives, Rhode Island Coalition Against Gun Violence, and many, many more. She's been featured in over 15 newspaper and TV reports. Please join me in welcoming J Shell Shank to the stage.
Hello all. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. My name is J Shell, and if you would allow me to, I'd like to reintroduce myself. J Shell is a combination of my parents' names, James and Michelle. This name began to form my identity before I was even born. I am of Cape Verdean heritage, as I am sure some of you are as well. My great-grandfather's name was Esley. He was a runaway slave from South Carolina. I don't know much about him besides what I just told you. What I do know is I have the blood and rage of a runaway slave rushing through my blood. Once again, developing my identity prior to my birth. I'm guessing at least a few of you have used platforms like 23andMe or Ancestry.com. When I use those platforms, I can find a limited amount of information about a handful of my family members. Even when looking at these family members, my family history was whitewashed. My great-grandparents were Cape Verdean, not Portuguese like the census claims. If you can't tell, today we'll be having a one-sided conversation on identity. This conversation may make you feel uncomfortable, but I simply ask for you to explore that feeling of uncomfortability. Try to pinpoint which sentence made you feel uncomfortable. Maybe you resonate with an experience, or you realize your privilege in similar scenarios. Now I'm going to ask you to participate in a small exercise with me. Think of, or write down, 3 pieces of your identity. Categories of things that can help you to craft your identity include your race, color, religion, sex, which includes gender identity, sexual orientation, and/or pregnancy, national orientation, age, disability, or genetic information. For some of you, this list may sound familiar. This is the same disclaimer at the bottom of every job application, ensuring that the employer will not discriminate against you for any of the named reasons. But let's return to your list. Here's mine. I'm Black. I'm young, like I only have my driver's permit and I failed my driver's test yesterday. But I'm also a female. If you couldn't guess, I'm a part of the most neglected and unprotected group in history. It's nothing new that a Black woman is the most unguarded person in the country. The fact that I'm young does nothing to help with that. I've been constantly overlooked for things. If it's not because of my race, it's my gender. If it's not my gender, it's my age. I guess you could say it's always something. Some of you may relate to that experience I just shared in its entirety. Some of you may only relate to bits and pieces, and some of you might have your own experiences. And that right there is intersectionality. Intersectionality is a term created by Kimberly Crenshaw, a Black woman, to describe the oppression African American woman X face. The term woman X is used to include transgender, non-binary, and non-white women. The term folks with an X is an umbrella term for people who engage in non-normative sexual orientation or identity. You may be wondering what intersectionality has to do with Black History Month. Well, please imagine the following facts as a stream of thinking. Black people are 3 times more likely to be killed by the police. The media reports on police brutality cases against men of color more than women of color. 38% of Black transgender people who interact with the police report harassment. Let's try another stream. Black women X are 4 times more likely than white women to die from pregnancy due to complications or lack of access to health care. Black women X are most likely to be uninsured and face gender financial barriers. They're also less likely to have access to prenatal care. Black women X's higher pregnancy risk-related deaths span from income to education disparities. Crenshaw argues that by treating Black women as purely women or purely Black, as they did in 1976 when the word was created, have repeatedly ignored specific challenges that Black women face as a group. There's also a sense of identity within activism. A group of activists may be the most diverse, accepting, and understanding body of humans you will ever meet. We all come from different backgrounds. Through social media activism, performative activism is not a way to measure our community, but it does help to give you some insight. A study this past summer shows that 48% of Black social media users said they posted a picture on social media to show their support for the cause. Also, Black users are twice more likely than white users to show that they have used a hashtag related to a political or social issue on these platforms. We can also see some disparities in age. I choose to believe this is because of the pressure our youth have faced to seek change. We have grown up in an era of school shooting, race-based violence, climate disasters, and so many more tragedies. Just over half of social media users ages 18 to 24, which is around 54%, said that they use these sites to look up information about rallies or protests happening in their area. So much activism is youth-focused or even youth-driven. In organizing spaces, we make it a priority to ensure that everyone feels heard and that their unique identities are validated. I hope that eventually this model of community building and, frankly, human decency will be duplicated around our nation. It is in times like this when we desperately need it. We've talked a whole lot about identity, but how does identity adapt to contemporary environments and distinct situations? Let's start with every POC's secret weapon. And it's also February, so I kind of do expect you to know what POC means at this point. I work at a local pharmacy, and I'm so grateful for that position, but the way that I acquired that position is through code switching. Some of you may know what this word means, but some of you may not. But very often, we POC code switch, both consciously and unconsciously, but we do it to talk or act more like those around us. A lot of folks will code switch not just to fit in, but to actively win over others. Without thought, I can shift my demeanor and my speech. My thoughts become calculated, quickened, and in search of the right things to say. The words pour out of my mouth, more pointed and stiff. I enunciate every vowel and stress every syllable. The production of it all is a departure from my normal self, but it's still seamless. My native language has been penned as African American vernacular English. I've grown up for years knowing I was speaking English, not knowing that it was categorized as slang or it is no longer acceptable to my academic writing. Anytime I've gone to answer my phone, it switches from beta to better, from finna to going to. Over the years, I've learned a skill that has become a requirement for all young adults of color to obtain. This is one example of how we are manipulating our identities into ways that will benefit us. Many POC will also encounter a position where their identity may become compromised or tokenized. For example, becoming a diversity hire or going to a school on scholarship with the help of your skin color. I attended a PWI, a predominantly white institution, from kindergarten to 5th grade. Actually, the school right over there, Henry Barnard. And these are crucial years for children that will allow them to begin to develop their identity and also acknowledge it as well. For years after that, I struggled to get accustomed to my true identity. My identity was masked and manipulated by my environment. If you are to take away something from this speech, I genuinely hope you do. Here are some points I wish you were able to absorb. Your identity is developed based on your environment you are placed in. Our identities are moldable, even adaptable, if you will. And we can begin to develop our situational identities when necessary in order to habituate. Everybody's identity is also intersectional. You are more than just Black. There are all layers to who we are. And in all fairness, these levels could also equal up to greater oppression. We saw this earlier when looking at how intersectionality affects marginalized groups. My generation is also a key example of how your surroundings can help to develop your identity, especially in activism. The one lesson I hope that you are able to take away is everybody has unique identities. Therefore, it is crucial that they feel welcomed and accepted. When someone asks you to use their proper name or pronouns, it is not difficult to adhere to their wishes. When you are unsure of someone's identity, it is best to refrain from all derogatory language. I actually believe that this is common sense, but human decency has become hard to come by. And if you are willing, I would love to ask you for a favor. Open your hearts to love. Love for the human race. It is all around you. Our media may be filled with so much despair, but there is also the most valuable substance of all, hope. So leave here feeling loved and hopeful. Those are the positive vibrations I wish to pass along to you. Thank you again for this opportunity, and please go spread some love. Thank you.
Thank you very much, not only for the performance, but for that outstanding speech.